Hi, welcome again to Business is Personal. I'm Corrie Block, and these are my amazing guests today. And I would like you to please take a minute, introduce yourselves.
Sure, my name is Sophina Rajah. I'm the founder of Leap Consulting. I work with organizations to help them onboard their employees more effectively and train them up in behavioral and soft skills.
Hi, I'm Mandar Joshi. I work with startup founders on strategic and financial matters. I basically help them transform their innovative idea into a scalable and profitable business model and a real business on ground.
Excellent.
Hi, my name is Rahman Risilia and I'm the managing partner for the MCG Group, which is a group full of companies of MCG, Chemistry, HR, Hopscotch and Ampersand.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk today about what I call the Dubai gap. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm irritated at the distance between people's business cards and their actual competencies. So I know that you've all seen this, and this is the topic. It came up in a previous podcast, we mentioned it. And so what it is, it's called a skills gap, right? So people have very powerful titles, Director of Business Development and Senior Vice President. And yet when you meet them and you ask them about, as a consultant, and you ask them about their actual job and what they do, you find can be a measurable gap between what it says on the business card and what they can actually do, what their real capabilities are. So that has kind of irritated me into starting this conversation about the skills gap in Dubai, which I would call the Dubai gap. So the Bait.com survey, which was just released now on the skills gap in the Middle East, has revealed that a lot of HR professionals are extremely dissatisfied with the gap between the CV and the actual competencies of people coming into roles. And they find it very difficult to find people, especially for senior roles and especially in terms of soft skills. So senior positions and soft skills seem to be the weakest part in terms of skills gap in the Middle East, and I think particularly in Dubai. Sophina, Mandar, and Rahman, thank you so much for being with me. Sophina, what do you think?
I think this is such an interesting topic. It's always a conversation that gets really interesting when you speak to different people in different professions, especially in this region and in Dubai. I've seen tons of situations where, the question gets raised myself when speaking to professionals as well as hiring managers. And I think it's just a really interesting emerging conversation that probably needs to be spoken about finally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mandar?
See, Corey, I work extensively with startup founders. Yeah. So I can speak from the point of view of startup founders and enterprises which are in early stage in first 1 or 2 years. And yes, the gap is very real. And specific to Dubai, yes, there are various reasons.
Yeah, sure. Rahman?
It's definitely something that we go through in our industry. Recruitment is something that we are sort of stuck with, especially in this region, where we are forced to sort of deal with candidates with almost inflated job titles, and then when you dig a lot deeper into their day-to-day responsibilities, it's nowhere near what they need to be to actually hold that title.
Yeah, exactly. So I think in terms of startups, there's it's kind of a hobby now to start your own company and call yourself the CEO. And I've done this. I know. I'm being transparent about this. I am the only legal employee in my company. But I have a powerful adhocracy of people that I've been working with for a decade or more that work with me on project basis. And I think that's the way that the future is going to go in terms of high skill set people, is we're going to build adhocracies that work for us. But I absolutely feel you on the whole startup thing.
Yeah.
That people just, they create companies, they call themselves CEO or director or chief evangelist or whatever they call it on the business card. And then there's no way of knowing what they can actually do. So how do we get to the place where we can understand what our friends or what our service providers are capable of? How do we do that?
You're right. Basically, it has become a hobby to start your own company. You feel nice. And I come across, I'll tell you, I come across startup founders.
Yeah.
Say, for example, a guy who is just out of university, a geek in maybe robotics or blockchain or artificial intelligence, and then he starts a venture. When he starts a venture, he gets his buddy who is also in technology
Yeah.
along with him. So he becomes a co-founder, a junior,
Yeah.
and this becomes a main founder. So the main founder becomes CEO.
Right.
Yeah, automatically.
Yeah.
And the co-founder becomes CTO because he knows technology. And then whoever joins finance, irrespective of their positions as senior or junior,
Yeah.
he becomes CFO and then
sure.
COO. And you're getting the gap is starting when the venture takes birth.
Yes.
You know, when the venture takes birth, there itself you have a wide gap between, because you decide your own designation. Nobody has certified you whether you fit in the job description that you have.
Yeah, that's right.
And then it keeps on widening. So to conclude, I mean, I would say my advice to startup founders is in the early years, it is okay. But then you need to know where you let go of the control and appoint a real CEO, real CTO, and kind of step back, you know.
That's good advice.
But it's not only startups. We are coming across this problem with just your established businesses.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a director of marketing, a large sort of a FMCG company that really is a marketing manager at best. But because they've been there for a long period of time, and it's that sort of longevity in that business that their progression had to be there. So all of a sudden that they've got a director title, potentially even a CMO title. I mean, there are family groups here that have around 14 CMOs.
Yeah.
You know, and then like you're thinking, hang on a second, who's the real CMO here?
Yeah.
So if you interview all 14, you'll probably identify maybe one or two candidates that are truly CMOs, that have the responsibilities and the achievements of a proper CMO.
Right.
And the others are marketing managers, directors of marketing, senior managers, whatever it may be.
Right. So we've replaced the title from a meritocracy to a kind of blend of tenure and honor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's
Absolutely.
rather than the title going to somebody who actually deserves it, who has the education, the experience, and the tenure, we just say, okay, like this person has been long enough in the company, they deserve this title, and so we honor them with the title. So the title is actually a matter of honor, not merit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we're having this, that we're speaking like this, because actually it's become a bit of a buzzword to even, founder, entrepreneur.
Yeah.
They're becoming very trendy these days. Like you become good at something in a remote way, even if it's just you do something really well on a project.
Yeah.
And overnight you become, I'm going to go and start a website. I'm going to design my website, and that's going to kickstart things. And overnight you become a CEO or a founder of something.
Yeah.
And I think some of us have guilty of it in the past, but actually what you learn is that this is trendy in this region. People love job titles. It doesn't necessarily, 90% of the time,
true, right?
it just does not reflect the actual capabilities of what an individual is able to do. And we see this majority of the time, and it's kind of interesting because it's more the norm here than it is not. You see it's so much more common, and it's fascinating to see. And you said earlier, at best somebody could be a marketing manager, but the title of director or head of or VP gets slapped on so very easily.
Yeah.
And then when you actually see the capabilities, and I can talk from experience, when you've been interviewed in the past many moons ago by directors and VPs, you're actually questioning, why am I nervous in this interview? I've clearly got more credibility than the person who I'm sitting and having a conversation with. And it's just really interesting to see how this is evolving and what's happening today.
And I'm not sure it's happened because of the internal sort of politics, within these organisations, or whether it's because this region more than any other region, has this sort of a guilty sort of habit of, for me to lure that person to my business, the first thing I need to do is give them an obscene job title, just to make them feel like they're more valuable than what they really are. Yeah. Working in Europe or working in Asia Pac, this is not a problem at all. Whereas here in this region, there's a real challenge with trying to get someone who has recently moved to an organisation with an inflated job title, and then getting them to come back down to earth and realise where they really sit on the landscape. And it's just a massive challenge for all of us.
Okay, so for HR professionals out there looking to hire, how do we move past this? Let's get something practical on the table. So scrap the job title. Okay, so when they're reading a CV, they see vice president of this, director of that. Let's just scrap that. How does an HR professional looking to recruit a senior level position get beyond the title on the left side of the CV and to find out the actual capacities of the person that's applying for the position?
The biggest challenge they're facing at the moment internally in the HR teams or the talent teams is that a lot of them are generalist recruiters who are working in-house. So if there is a specific blockchain vacancy, that they need someone to head up that department or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
The talent acquisition specialist or the HR generalist
Yeah.
typically doesn't know the core fundamentals of what makes a successful director within blockchain.
Yeah.
They know the core fundamentals on whether or not you're a nice person and whether
Yeah.
you fit within the culture.
Yeah.
But when it comes to those specific skills in digital, in technology, in marketing, or in anything else like that,
Yeah.
that requires that more advanced knowledge, a lot of internal recruitment teams or HR teams just don't have that here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Sophina?
I've also noticed that there's a very standard approach to this whole recruiting for the right sort of skill set and sort of the personality fit within an organization. And what that means is they don't tend to take a holistic approach in looking at the technical skills
Yep.
and looking at the personality, culture fit of the individual and their soft skills as such, the emotional intelligence. And I think that when you start to merge those two together, you get more of a well-rounded fit of an individual, both looking from a technical perspective, but actually can they do the actual job itself?
Yeah.
And then are they well-rounded enough? Do they have the right background and the skill set
Yeah.
and the expertise to actually fit into the organization? I think when you look at it from a holistic perspective like that, you've got more chance of being more effective. But at the
Yeah.
moment, it's a very bog standard sort of a vanilla approach to it all. And
Yeah, yeah.
that's what that's what puts me off, actually. That's what really sort of irritates me.
Mandar?
What I would say is, we in Dubai specifically, we focus too much on the HR professionals, on CVs, resume, what is written inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do not focus so much on the interview itself. So I've seen this, when there is a bunch of CVs and then you shortlist the CVs based on what is written there, believing that all of that is true, and then you just finish off interviews one after the other, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So my advice would be, spend more time in interviews, go through 2 or 3 rounds, one HR round, technical round, and, assess the person properly.
Yeah.
Don't just trust on the CV what he has written.
I absolutely agree with you. I think this all comes down to the interview. And I go through 8 to 10 interviews a year because I'm a consultant, so I have a number of clients every year, so I'm always interviewing, which is great. I mean, I get the chance to sell myself, but I think one of my best experiences with a recent client of mine, I was going in to do top line strategy, core strategy, executive committee coaching and leadership training for them, tier 1 leadership training. And so they brought me in for an interview with the director of HR. Great time, it was excellent. And usually I would expect a decision to be made at that level, but they didn't. They asked me for another round of interviews, even just as an external service provider. Never mind an employee, right? As an external service provider, they called me in for another interview, and in the panel they had an internal expert and an external expert. They had hired someone for the day just to come and grill me for an hour.
Wow.
To see whether or not I actually had the competencies and capacities to provide what they needed at that level.
Right.
And she had like 30 years in the business. She was amazing herself. And her role was to just figure out whether or not I was who I said I was. And that was it. It was an hour. And it was a brilliant, life-giving conversation because I was talking with another person at my level in terms of my expertise and knowledge. And it was really a lot of fun. And I think this is good direction for HR professionals, is to build an ad hocratic, if we can use that word, an adhocracy committee for key roles, whether you're bringing in an external consultant or you're bringing in somebody to a senior level position. Build a committee to interview them that has the expertise to make sure that they have the capacity to provide on the spot the kind of skills and experience that they're claiming that they have.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. The interview is so key.
Yeah.
And it is worth it, spending so much time on the interview.
Of course.
Well, they kind of have this, right? They engage with agencies like us.
Yeah.
And again, the biggest challenge they face is 80 to 85% of the agencies not doing it right for them. So the external partners are really going through the process just to tick off boxes.
Yeah.
They're just saying, yes, okay, we'll send that CV because that CV is qualified in my eyes.
Yeah.
What they should be doing as an external partner and is going through everything the way that person put you through their process, and then being that sort of trusted advisor to that client and saying, I believe this candidate is right for this and this reason.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen too often in our industry.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge that we face, is that we have to overcome that sort of stigma, which is 80 to 85% of them just say, here you go for an underqualified candidate for a role, whereas the other 10, 15, 20% are the ones trying to do it right.
Yeah.
But there aren't many of them.
Yeah,
and
that's
that,
right.
and that is just too difficult to overcome.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think having sort of a more human approach to it makes sense.
Yeah,
sort
of
of if you
course.
get an external voice, an external third pair of eyes, as they
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
because you can always, you know, when you get a third pair of eyes looking in on a situation, and you've actually got them to identify from the client itself, for example, what they're looking for,
Yeah.
what type of a person. I mean, because I've always been of the opinion that you should always hire more for the attitude rather than the actual skill set. But obviously here in certain roles, and especially the more senior you get, you actually do need to be very, very sort of attached very clearly to what the technical spec is, as well as what the actual overall
Right.
personality fit is as well. And I think if we just brought a more human approach to it, and actually if everybody took the approach that you went through, I think there'd be a lot more effective people sitting in the roles that they can actually do, and they would have the job titles
That's
that
right.
reflect what they do.
So what do you do in a situation where you have a very senior candidate who's very proven in their career, only this person has never had an interview for 10, 15, 20 years, has always been tapped on the shoulder and been headhunted?
Yeah.
Okay, so they haven't really had to sort of go through a process because
Yeah.
they've always been offered positions. And then that person 15, 20 years into their career
Yeah.
is now coming to a stage where I have to interview. And I've met hundreds of them globally where they just are horrible face-to-face for an
Yeah.
interview. They don't know how to present themselves. They don't know how to sell themselves.
Right.
Because their whole career has been, you're great at what you do as a CTO or a CIO,
Yeah.
come to me.
Yeah.
So then how do we overcome that when that person is great at what they do, they just don't know how to interview.
Yeah.
They don't know how to sell themselves.
I think this is where sort of the soft skills kind of comes into it a lot more, when you sort of get to know yourself a little bit better when it comes to the behavioral side of things.
Yeah.
And self-awareness on this is always key, and it's the most overseen thing, and it's
Yeah.
overlooked by miles out here.
Yeah.
You know, the amount of the lack of self-awareness that happens is amazing. And I think that's a very simple starting point.
No, it's so true. I think one of the keys to that is to deformalize. Okay, so you have an interview where a senior professional comes in, they behave, you know, mediocre in the interview because they're not good at it, they're not experienced.
They're
they
nervous
don't
and
do
fidgety sometimes as
yeah,
well.
they don't do
Yeah.
10 interviews a year. So it's not normal
just
for them.
not
They've been
done
in the same position
Yeah.
for the last decade. So I
Yeah.
think one of the keys would be to deformalize. To have the awkward conversation in the room, but then have, as a part of the interview process, say, look, we're going to do the interview and then we're going to go out for lunch.
Yeah.
Okay, so they feel like lunch is other
Absolutely.
than the interview or post-interview lunch, but actually lunch is part of the interview.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just don't say it out loud. So you deformalize it, and then that allows them the opportunity to relax. You see who they are when they're not performing, when they're off stage, right?
And you
So
see the real
Yeah.
person.
It's almost
Exactly.
like the final stage, which is the meet and greet with the CEO. It's only a meet and greet,
Oh, I
5-10
know.
minutes with the CEO. When
Actually, it's an interview.
that's the
Yeah.
final stage where you have to nail it. Yeah.
Well, look, I think, okay, and also one of the things that irritates me about this process is that I don't think HR departments are equipped to take this seriously enough. I don't think they're given the resources to bring in external people to challenge senior applicants on their capacities. I don't think they're given the permission to take time
No.
to go and take 6 potential candidates out for a lunch before hiring a director of anything. And I don't think they're called into account for that. Because, okay, look, take it this seriously. If you're calling in an external consultant or service provider into your company to provide a service, think of them like a surgeon. How would you go about choosing a surgeon? And it's not just reputation, right? You would ask people who've been with that surgeon before. You would bring in external people to say, hey, listen, I want a second opinion on this surgeon. Are they good? If it's going to be invasive, and it's going to be invasive, so you want to have a really good quality of input before you choose that surgeon. And even more so if you're choosing somebody to come on staff, because that's like choosing a parent for your child. So it's not just contract service providers within your company.
Yeah.
You're going to give them the responsibility for leading 500 of your teammates. Why would you take that lightly? Why would you ever think that you could get that done in a 1-hour interview or 2-hour interview? That should be 2 or 3 days worth of, hey, listen, do we trust each other enough that I could give you my kids and trust you with them? Because if I can't give you my kids and trust you with them, why would I give you 500 of my teammates and trust you with them?
True, true.
Are we only talking about bringing people into an organization, or are we also talking about the skill gap of the people that we currently have in our organisation,
Yeah.
and we're not doing anything to progress them, to develop them further.
Yeah, I
So
think there's two
term they stay.
different issues there. Go ahead, Rahman. From internally, how would you go about elevating people in a more appropriate way than just honor and tenure?
Oh, look, we launched the business 12 months ago, which is focused around L&D, because there's a massive gap in this, especially in this region. So there's no training, there's no internal sort of development plans for anyone at all. Okay, so I think back to my career. I think it was 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
I was assigned a corporate psychologist for 12 months. I worked with that person. It was a full development plan
Yeah.
to work on sort of communication styles, behavioural patterns, and it just changed my life.
Yeah.
Because I was able to step outside and look at myself, how I was talking to my team,
Yeah.
and realizing that communication style wasn't working for half of them. And this person who developed me for that 12 months got me to see so many different things, not only about the way that I behave, but even just like me as a person.
Right.
But that also got me to commit to that business for a very long time.
Right.
Because that business committed to me.
Sure.
And what we're seeing here is, although everyone is quite sort of money driven in this region, a lot of the reasons when you move past that superficial sort of reason why they're looking to move
Yeah.
is my company's not giving me anything. No development, no career path, no clear view as to where I'm going to be in
Sure.
12, 24 months time, because there's no real investment into keeping them happy. So learning and development, creating a sort of a culture where everyone's just working well together and believing that they can be a part of a longer vision. This is something that is quite key.
Yeah, sure.
I think the job titles is just, again, they're very loosely, this is what we're here to discuss today. And I think when you're going for an interview as a candidate, you almost, you don't pay much attention. In my experience, when I've had to coach individuals on preparation for sort of job interviews,
Yeah.
they've often been situations, but this is a director level role, what should I be saying? And the key message that you try to get through to them is just be yourself.
Yeah.
Be yourself and let your best self shine through. And only when they are comfortable in their own skin and they've got that self-awareness can they actually let them shine through in the best way possible.
Yeah.
But there's so much pressure attached to that job title. Am I going to walk in? Am I going to talk and look like a VP or a director or a GM? And actually, if you just allow the individual to be themselves, be relaxed, and like you said, let's break it up. Let's take away the stigma of it being such a bog standard approach to let's be interviewed 3 times, a 3-stage interview. Let's get seen by a HR partner, a generalist, and then the hiring manager, and then a CEO for a quick handshake
So
kind of thing. Let's take a more human and realistic approach to it. Let the person come through as in their own self,
Yeah.
and maybe if that job title does not suit them, then it does not mean that they cannot do the job itself. Maybe it's just the job title that needs to switch, and there's so much focus on that one small area. And that's why I think the shift in mindset and thinking needs to come from. At least begin to start. That's my take on it.
Are we seeing that happen? Are we seeing that shift happen at a
I would say
rapid
very
enough pace?
At a
Or
very
very
slow
gradually.
pace.
Very slow
very
pace.
Very slow
gradually,
pace.
and yeah, and the skills gap
Yeah.
plays differently when the economy is growing up and
Yeah.
economy is going down. This is also I've seen. When, for example, when the economy is going down, the biggest mistake that I have seen the organizations do that they cut down the budget on HR, they cut down the budget on employment,
Yeah.
and then what happens is they decide a budget, and then they select the person who fits in that budget, irrespective of whether he has the skills, because they have to survive with that budget.
So true.
And the biggest blunder, even bigger, what that they do is, basically cut down the people who are more efficient, more knowledgeable, because knowledgeable and efficient people are more expensive.
Yeah.
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 And retain or survive somehow with less knowledgeable, less efficient, but less costly people.
That's such a good
And
point.
it takes years after the economy starts back,
Yeah.
growing. It takes years for them to correct it, because they cannot overnight change organization structure. So I would say this is a blunder, and this is happening again and again and again
Yeah.
whenever there are cycles in economy.
And like you said, they've made the mistake of making a long-term commitment to a
Yes.
lower efficiency, lower capacity person.
And this,
Yeah.
this is what effectively, in the long term, ends up costing them more money, ends up costing them a longer period of
Yeah,
time in getting to where their overall objective is as an organisation.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it ends up turning over staff at a more rapid rate, and they're just constantly backtracking, because they're refilling a gap which they need. They have to.
Well, we're sitting around this table, 4 of us from 4 different angles, looking into the market, and
Yeah.
and all of us with the same opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yet the people that are embedded into this problem
Yeah,
are the ones that are blinded by this issue or challenge.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So CEOs out there, you need to commit to your HR departments to give them the resources that they need to find the people that you actually need, not the people that you can afford. That's short-term thinking. Stop thinking short-term. If you're building a company to last to the end of the year, fine. But if you're building a company to last 100 years or to have a solid exit plan, you're going to need a long-term strategy for your hiring. So commit to your HR department to give them the resources that they need to hire talent and to find the right talent. Okay, so the CV might get you the interview, but the interview will get you the job. And we've discussed that the interview itself needs to be a longer process, not an HR generalist, then the hiring manager, then the CEO handshake. But we want to find the kinds of people that match with our not just our hierarchy, but our value systems as corporate communities. So take the time, do the interview well. It will save you a lot of time and money and frustration in the long term because you'll have the right people in the right positions, and that's what we really need, is the right people in the right positions so that the rest of us can trust the market and we can start trusting each other's business cards again.
Yeah.
That's where we need to go. All right.